Today I'm here to announce that our office will be filing charges against Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michelle Singer.
Ron Howard and Rob Reiner have long been regarded as towering figures in modern filmmaking. Each followed his own creative path, yet both were fueled by a shared devotion to storytelling. Howard became synonymous with suspenseful, fully immersive cinematic worlds, while Reiner earned his reputation through sharp wit, emotional honesty, and character-driven stories. Their approaches differed, but the respect between them was unmistakable. Over the years, their paths crossed frequently at industry events, where conversations about film felt natural and admiration flowed quietly between them. That's why a sudden surge of disturbing rumors involving Rob Reiner sent shockwaves through Hollywood, and struck Howard on a deeply personal level. For a brief moment, fear and confusion set in. The idea of losing a longtime friend was devastating. What made it even more jarring was that just weeks earlier, Howard vividly remembered standing beside Rob at a party. Rob had been beaming with pride, talking about his son Nick, how he had battled addiction and was finally finding his way back. That happiness was unmistakable, written clearly across Rob's face. The two directors spent the evening exchanging ideas, imagining future projects, and talking about stories still waiting to be told. So when exaggerated and alarming reports began circulating online, the emotional impact was immediate and heavy, well before the truth could catch up. The situation quickly became a painful example of how rapidly misinformation can spread and how deeply it can affect those involved. In the end, the rumors proved to be false, but the emotional toll remained. For Howard, it felt like glimpsing a nightmare version of reality, one no storyteller ever wants to confront. Reports later surfaced that Nick had attended Conan O'Brien's Christmas party on Saturday night with his parents, Rob and Michelle, though some sources questioned whether he was officially invited. Nick was said to be wearing a hoodie and behaving strangely, with claims that he was bothering celebrities outside the event. According to reports, he allegedly got into a tense exchange with Bill Hader of SNL and Barry, before storming off in frustration. Rumors also suggested that Rob had privately told friends he was deeply worried about Nick, fearing that his mental state was worsening. Ron Howard later spoke about the situation publicly, a rare moment where his emotions were clearly visible. In a brief media appearance, he made it clear that Rob was far more than a professional peer. He described him as a friend, someone who had walked beside him through decades of filmmaking, a bond he held deeply. His voice was calm, yet heavy with feeling, and every sentence reflected how deeply the scare had shaken him, not only as a director, but as a person. As he continued, Howard's expression revealed a mix of frustration and sorrow. He reflected on meeting Rob during their early years, when both were young, driven, and chasing dreams that seemed impossible at the time. He remembered Rob as someone overflowing with ambition, yet grounded and humble. The admiration between them, he said, had never faded with time. When Howard began speaking about the films that defined Reiner's career, his emotion became impossible to ignore. He spoke openly about what set Rob apart in Hollywood. Rob made films that could make audiences laugh, cry, and reflect all at once. To Howard, filmmaking was never just about craft, it was about connection. His words hung heavily in the room, filled with unmistakable respect. To him, Rob Reiner was never just the creative force behind The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, or Stand By Me. He was someone who transformed humor into meaning and turned friendship into something lasting and genuine. As Howard's voice softened, the weight of legacy became clear. Rob's films will endure for generations, but witnessing a close friend face personal struggles left a lasting emotional mark. Howard publicly expressed his support for the Reiner family, sharing a heartfelt message meant to show compassion and solidarity during a painful time, not to create spectacle. He described Rob as a treasured friend, a remarkable collaborator, and a rare storyteller, words that revealed just how deep their connection ran. Then Howard shared a private memory, one he seldom discusses. Years earlier, at a casual Hollywood gathering filled with laughter and nostalgic film talk, he noticed Rob standing alone. He held a drink in his hand, but his expression looked exhausted and distant, completely out of place in the lively room. Howard approached him and gently asked how he was doing. Rob hesitated, then quietly led him out onto a balcony, away from the noise. There, Rob finally opened up. He spoke about Nick, about the weight he was carrying, and the fear in his voice was unmistakable. Howard later recalled how carefully Rob spoke, never dramatic, always respectful, about addiction and emotional setbacks. He talked about feeling caught between his role as a father and his instinct to protect, while often feeling powerless. "I could hear the pain in everything he said," Howard later admitted. Rob tried to keep his composure, even smiled at times, but the burden he carried was impossible to hide. Eventually, Rob spoke plainly. He told Howard that Nick had been battling addiction for years. They had tried treatment, structure, and every form of support they could find, yet relapse continued to pull him back. Rob explained that, to him, the issue was never about punishment. When someone is struggling, he believed, punishment only deepens the wound. He compared it to watching your child run into traffic. You don't punish them, you try to pull them back to safety. His voice was quiet, his eyes fixed on the dark sky beyond the balcony. It was the kind of pain only a parent could fully understand. Ron Howard never forgot that night, the moment Rob Reiner finally lowered his guard. Rob confessed that he had poured everything he had into being Charlie, believing the film might help his son heal and perhaps bring the family closer together. For a time, Rob said, it seemed to work. Nick stayed clean, and hope quietly returned. But then his voice tightened. Now, he admitted, it felt like they were right back in the middle of the storm. Fear threaded through every sentence. Rob told Howard he lived with a constant dread, waking up each day afraid that one morning he might lose his son for good. Howard listened without interrupting, leaning in, choosing his words carefully. He told Rob that he had done everything any father could possibly do, that Nick was fortunate to have both him and Michelle standing firmly by his side. Rob shook his head slowly, emotion breaking through his voice. Sometimes, he said, they listened too closely to doctors and not closely enough to their own son. All he wanted was to save Nick, yet the harder he tried, the more powerless he felt. The two men sat quietly after that, taking slow sips of wine, letting the truth settle between them in heavy silence. That conversation stayed with Howard long after the night ended. The years passed, but the feeling never faded. In October 2025, Howard and Reiner crossed paths again at the Academy's Governor's Awards in Los Angeles. The room was filled with icons, polished speeches, and reflections on Hollywood's past. As Howard entered the venue, he noticed Rob across the room, laughing freely, surrounded by old friends. The sight stopped him. He walked straight over, and the two embraced tightly, patting each other's backs like brothers who had survived long, difficult battles together. Howard told him he looked great and asked how he'd been. Rob laughed, his eyes shining in a way Howard hadn't seen in years. He spoke with excitement, saying Nick was back home. He had been clean for months, working small jobs, reconnecting with the family, talking the way he used to. Warmth spread through Howard's chest as memories of those late-night confessions flooded back. He squeezed Rob's shoulder and told him how incredible the news was. After years of struggle, hope had finally found its way in. They moved off to the side and spent time talking about films, young talent, and ideas still circling in their minds. Yet Howard couldn't stop thinking about Rob's smile. It carried something rare, real optimism, earned only after years of fear and exhaustion. Looking back, Howard later admitted his voice softened whenever he thought about it. Who could have imagined, he said, that only months later life would once again reveal how fragile hope can be. He confessed that he still remembers the shock that washed over him when he first read about the devastating situation surrounding Rob Reiner's family. The hope that had only just begun to shine seemed to disappear in an instant. Howard spent a long time staring out the window, his mind drifting back to that earlier night, full of laughter, bright lights, and cautious optimism. He remembered telling Rob how happy he was for him, urging him to hold on to that hope. Rob had responded with a quiet nod, his eyes glowing with belief. It was only later that Howard truly understood how delicate that moment had been. Life rarely moves in straight lines, and its sharp turns often arrive without warning. In the days following the painful headlines and emotional aftermath, Howard found himself revisiting The Princess Bride, one of the films he cherished most. When the familiar line, "as you wish," echoed on screen, he smiled through tears and softly thought to himself that Rob had lived fully, and that his work would endure. Howard's public response was measured and thoughtful, guided by respect rather than speculation. He offered words of peace, gratitude, and remembrance, emphasizing that Rob's creative spirit, his humor, kindness, and humanity, could never be erased. In that moment, Hollywood felt heavier, yet the films remained vibrant, alive, and deeply human. In truth, Howard and Reiner were never constant companions. They didn't speak weekly or appear at each other's doors unannounced. But within the film world, their connection was built on something equally powerful: mutual respect. Both shared a belief in storytelling as a deeply human force, shaped by Jewish heritage and childhoods rooted in homes that encouraged curiosity, creativity, and expression. Reiner was drawn to grounded, character-focused stories, films centered on friendship, love, vulnerability, and inner struggle. Howard gravitated toward scale and wonder, creating emotionally charged worlds that felt vast yet intimate. Different approaches, the same purpose. Their paths crossed often at award shows, panels, and major industry gatherings, always marked by genuine respect. Reiner once remarked that Howard's ability to merge emotion with visual storytelling was something every director could learn from. Howard returned that admiration, praising Reiner's rare gift for capturing the heart of everyday life. Spoken quietly and sincerely, that kind of praise represents one of the highest forms of respect among filmmakers. Which brings the focus back to Howard himself. Who is he as a director? How does he shape light, sound, and framing to create stories that don't just reach the screen, but remain etched in memory? Ron Howard was born on December 18, 1946, in Cincinnati, Ohio, into a family of Eastern European Jewish heritage. He was the eldest child and the only son, growing up alongside three younger sisters. His father, Arnold Howard, was a pioneering electrical engineer who worked with early-generation computers. His mother, Leah, was a devoted pianist who filled their home with music, warmth, and creativity. That contrast, logic and emotion, structure and imagination, would later form the foundation of one of cinema's most powerful and enduring storytelling voices. Ron Howard grew up in a household filled with warmth, but never with permanence. Just as he began to feel settled, boxes would reappear and another move would follow, driven by his father's work. New neighborhoods, unfamiliar classrooms, and unfamiliar faces became routine. Stability was rare, and Ron learned early that nothing stayed the same for long. Looking back, Howard once said he remembered every single move. Each one felt like losing a small part of himself. Yet that sense of loss quietly shaped something powerful within him. It taught him how to observe rather than speak, how to read people, and how to find his footing in unfamiliar spaces. Those instincts weren't born from comfort, but from constant disruption. When he was just 6 years old, his parents took him to see The Greatest Show on Earth, directed by Cecil B. DeMille. As the theater lights dimmed and the spectacle of the circus filled the screen, young Ron sat frozen, eyes wide, barely breathing. Walking out of the theater, he held tightly to his mother's hand and whispered that he wanted to create things that could frighten people and fill them with joy at the same time. Leah smiled, brushed his hair aside, and gently told him that to do that, he would first need to learn how to tell stories. That moment stayed with him. Years later, when Ron was 12, his father gave him an 8mm camera, and everything shifted. He began filming obsessively: family vacations, backyard adventures, staged scenes, and toy train crashes. He even recreated nightmares he once feared, placing himself in control of the chaos. He told his sisters to play the victims while he played the hero. Those rough, flickering films became a way for him to master fear and turn it into meaning. But life beyond the home was far less forgiving. After the family moved to Phoenix, Arizona, in 1957, Ron found himself one of the only Jewish kids in the area. He later spoke openly about being bullied, about fists, insults, and the quiet isolation that followed. He often wondered why he felt so different. Instead of pushing outward, he turned inward, watching the world more than participating in it. That pain sharpened his empathy, giving him a deep understanding of loneliness, fear, and hope, emotions that would later pulse through his films. At 13, Ron made a 40-minute war film titled Escape to Nowhere, which won a youth film competition. By 16, he spent all his savings on Firelight, a science fiction film that ran over 2 hours. It screened once at a local theater to a small audience, but to Ron, it felt monumental. As the lights came up, he told himself with complete certainty that one day people would line up to see his films. One of the most painful moments of his teenage years came shortly after. During a family camping trip, Ron unknowingly filmed something that would haunt him for years. While recording near a campfire, he accidentally captured his mother holding hands with Bernie Adler, his father's closest friend. The realization hit him instantly. He shut off the camera and buried the truth, keeping it to himself for nearly 3 years. When his parents divorced in 1965, his father Arnold quietly took responsibility, shielding Leah and protecting the family from public scrutiny. Ron, who had moved to California with his father, didn't understand the full story at the time. In anger and confusion, he turned on Arnold and once accused him of destroying the family. Arnold didn't argue or defend himself. He simply accepted the blame in silence. That pain lingered for more than 15 years. Ron grew emotionally distant from his father, holding on to resentment and misunderstanding. The unresolved tension, combined with loneliness and guilt, deepened Howard's understanding of human complexity. Themes of love, silence, resentment, and forgiveness would later echo powerfully in his work, most clearly in The Fabelmans, where memory and storytelling collided. By the late 1960s, Howard's talent could no longer be ignored. In 1968, his short film Amblin screened at a festival and caught the attention of executives at Universal Studios. In that moment, Ron knew filmmaking was no longer just a passion, it was his future. He dropped out of college, became an unpaid intern at Universal, and secretly used empty offices at night to work on his own projects, quietly laying the foundation for everything that would come next. In 1969, at only 22 years old, Ron Howard signed a long-term directing contract with Universal Studios, becoming the youngest filmmaker in Hollywood history to secure such a deal. He began his career in television, directing episodes of Night Gallery and Columbo. But everything shifted in 1971 with the television film Duel. The story of an ordinary man relentlessly pursued by a faceless truck driver captivated both audiences and critics. Its success paved the way for Howard's first theatrical feature, The Sugarland Express. Then came 1975. With Jaws, Howard ignited a cultural phenomenon. The film earned more than $470 million worldwide and forever changed the industry by defining the modern summer blockbuster. Howard later admitted the production was exhausting and chaotic. He joked that there were moments he feared the mechanical shark would defeat him before the movie was finished. But Jaws transformed him into a global name and reshaped Hollywood economics. What followed proved his range extended far beyond suspense. Films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. the Extraterrestrial revealed his deep empathy and emotional sensitivity. He later confronted history and human suffering through films such as Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, tackling moral complexity with unflinching honesty. In 1994, he co-founded DreamWorks, helping produce major successes across multiple genres. Even well into the 2000s, Howard continued delivering powerful work with films like Lincoln and Bridge of Spies, showing that his creative drive had never dimmed. Despite worldwide fame, Howard kept his private life largely protected. He married actress Amy Irving in 1985, and later that year they welcomed their son, Max Samuel. Their marriage ended in 1989, but they remained respectful and committed co-parents. Amy later explained that their focus was always on what was best for Max. Not long after, Howard found lasting partnership with Kate Capshaw, whom he had directed in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Howard met Capshaw twice during auditions and immediately felt she was right for the role. He later recalled watching her screen test and knowing instantly. Kate would later joke that she never expected a role filled with screaming and danger to lead her to the love of her life. During filming in Sri Lanka and the United States, the two grew closer through shared meals, long conversations, and quiet moments between intense shooting days. At the time, Howard was still committed to Amy Irving, so his relationship with Kate remained strictly professional. Only after his divorce in 1989 did Howard and Capshaw begin dating and eventually move in together. Kate later explained that although they felt a strong connection, they waited until the timing was right. Before their wedding, Kate converted to Judaism. In 1991, they married in both civil and Orthodox Jewish ceremonies. Howard later shared that marrying Kate helped him reconnect deeply with his Jewish identity and cultural roots. Together, they formed a large blended family. Kate brought her daughter Jessica from a previous marriage, while Howard had his son Max. Over time, they welcomed additional biological and adopted children, creating one of Hollywood's most well-known extended families. Their marriage has now lasted more than 3 decades, an extraordinary achievement in the entertainment industry. Kate gradually stepped away from acting to focus on family life and painting, while Howard continued directing at the highest level. They raised 7 children, all of whom have grown into independent adults pursuing their own paths. Some entered film and entertainment, while others chose completely different careers. In 2020, one of Howard's daughters publicly discussed her personal career choices, emphasizing that they were made independently with full family support. Howard has always maintained that parenting is about guidance and care, not control. Beyond his own family, he also became a mentor to young actors early in their careers, most notably Drew Barrymore during E.T., providing stability during a vulnerable time in her life. Howard once said that being there for her was not just responsibility, but something deeply meaningful. Today, even at 79 years old, Howard remains actively involved in filmmaking. He continues developing new projects and revisiting classic franchises with the same curiosity he had as a teenager. He has often said that he has never grown tired of storytelling, viewing every film as a fresh opportunity to say something honest. In recent years, he has placed greater emphasis on health and balance, making lifestyle changes to sustain the physical and mental demands of modern filmmaking. Close collaborators say his creativity remains sharp, driven by purpose rather than pressure. Howard's career journey is highlighted, from his early television work and breakthrough with Duel, to redefining Hollywood with Jaws, and later creating timeless films such as E.T., Schindler's List, and Saving Private Ryan. His personal life is also explored, including his marriages, large blended family, and his role as a supportive father and mentor, notably to Drew Barrymore. The passage concludes with Howard's guiding belief that fame and awards fade, but people are the true story, a philosophy that has shaped both his films and his lifelong relationships, including his enduring respect for Rob Reiner.